So, if you had infinite money, like just an absolute bottomless bank account,
Right.
would you actually buy the blood of a healthy teenager and, I don't know, pump it directly into your own veins to stay young?
I mean, it's a completely wild premise to start with, right? But here we are in 2026, and we're looking at a reality where that isn't just the plot of some dystopian sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
It's an active, heavily funded lifestyle choice being made by some of the absolute wealthiest people on the planet.
It's crazy. And that question really sits right at the center of the mission for our deep dive today. We're going to unpack this massive, just frontal collision between two radically different philosophies of life, aging, and, well, death.
Yeah, the ultimate showdown.
Exactly. Because on one side, you've got Silicon Valley's cutting edge, highly engineered, and let's be honest, slightly vampiric science.
Just a little bit.
Right. And then on the other side, we have the ancient practices of Eastern internal alchemy.
Which is really what makes this whole topic so compelling to look at. We aren't just talking about two different medical protocols for, like, extending life.
No.
We're looking at two fundamentally opposed definitions of what the human body actually is.
Yeah. And to frame this whole discussion for you listening, I want you to imagine the human body as like a classic vintage car. Let's say a 1960s Mustang.
Oh, nice choice.
Thanks. So there are basically two ways you can keep that car running long past its prime, right? The first way is you aggressively swap out its physical parts.
Like the engine sputters, so you just buy a new one.
Exactly. The transmission slips, you replace it. The upholstery fades, you rip it out. You are just constantly hunting for fresh external hardware to keep the machine going.
And that, right there, perfectly encapsulates the Western Silicon Valley approach to longevity.
But then there's the second way. Instead of just buying new parts, you learn to become like an engine whisperer. You listen to the hum of the motor. You learn how the fuel mixture actually affects the spark plugs. You tune it from the inside out, so you optimize how the original existing parts work together.
So the engine essentially learns to maintain itself.
Right, and that is the Eastern approach. It's just an incredibly stark contrast.
It really is. And to understand this clash, we first need to look at the extreme lengths the world's wealthiest people are going to right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We need to see how they're treating their bodies like biological machines that, just require a hardware upgrade.
Yeah. So if we look at the landscape of extreme longevity right now, you immediately run into figures like the tech elite, Brian Johnson.
Oh, yeah. Project Blueprint.
Right. The highly publicized Project Blueprint. I mean, these individuals are executing massive multi-million-dollar personal missions to completely halt the aging process.
And the underlying philosophy driving all this, the thing fueling it, is something called the reductionist mindset.
Okay, let's unpack this. Isn't this just the ultimate industrial mindset? It feels like they're treating life as, like, a warranty that can be extended indefinitely if you just have enough capital.
That is essentially the exact mental model. In this view, the West sees the body not as some mysterious, holistic living organism, but as a complicated hardware system driven by biological code.
It's highly compartmentalized.
Exactly. If a physical part breaks, you find a replacement.
Yeah.
If the system slows down, you identify the specific failing component and you upgrade it.
It's the ultimate engineer's perspective. Like, if there's a bug in the code, you patch the code.
Right.
But how does that actually translate to biology? Like, how do you patch human aging?
Well, what's fascinating here is how this translates specifically to blood. This whole reductionist logic reaches its absolute apex in a procedure called parabiosis.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And to understand what people are doing today, you really have to look at where this technique originated in the laboratory, specifically with mice.
I've read a bit about this in the sources, and it is a genuinely gruesome visual. What exactly were they doing in these labs?
So in the early 2000s, researchers took 2 live mice, one old mouse whose biological systems were failing, and one young, totally healthy mouse.
Okay.
And they surgically stitched their circulatory systems together.
Wait, they literally stitched them together?
Literally joined their flanks so that the heart of the young mouse was pumping blood into the old mouse. It created a single shared blood supply.
Wow. So the older failing mouse is suddenly running its entire body on fresh young blood. What actually happened to them?
The older mouse experienced what looked like miraculous rejuvenation. I mean, its muscles healed faster, its liver tissue regenerated.
No way.
Yeah, its cognition and memory improved, and even its fur grew back thicker. The young blood appeared to completely reverse the biological clock of the older animal.
Okay, but why? Like, what is actually in the young blood that acts like a magic undo button for aging?
It comes down to the cellular environment. So as we age, our bodies accumulate senescent cells.
The zombie cells, right?
Exactly, the zombie cells. They stop dividing, but they refuse to die, and they just sit around secreting these inflammatory proteins called cytokines.
Gross.
Right. And at the same time, our stem cells just get exhausted. So the Western reductionist view posits that aging is basically a math problem in the bloodstream.
Meaning you just accumulate too many of these bad factors, the inflammatory junk, and you lose the good factors like the regenerative protein.
Yes, the exosomes that tell your cells to actually repair themselves.
Right.
So the math is just bad stuff goes up, good stuff goes down, and that equals aging.
Wow. And if you follow that logic, the solution is purely mechanical. You don't need to change anything fundamentally about the organism.
You just alter the math.
Right. You supplement the good factors from the outside. So the young mouse blood just flooded the old mouse with regenerative signals that drowned out the inflammatory noise.
Which brings us to the human equivalent in 2026. Tech moguls are spending millions of dollars annually to find healthy, carefully screened teenage donors.
I still can't believe this is real.
It is. They're extracting plasma from these young people and systematically injecting it into themselves.
Because the belief is that if you continually flood your system with the biological signaling profile of an 18-year-old,
your cells will continue to act like they belong to an 18-year-old.
I am struggling to get past the industrial nature of this. It really just feels like, extending a warranty by buying replacement fluids.
Well, you're hitting on a core philosophical tenet of this approach. It's what the sources call a philosophy of searching outward.
Searching outward.
Yeah, it's a logic fueled by conquest,
Yeah.
by external dependence, and just this relentless pursuit of efficiency. It views vitality as a literal external resource.
Like coal or oil.
Exactly. Something that can be mined from the young, measured in a centrifuge, and injected into the old.
It is literal biological consumerism. It relies entirely on the external world to solve the internal problem of mortality. So what happens when you take this whole spare parts mindset, this multi-million-dollar blood-swapping strategy, and you present it to an Eastern medical practitioner?
Oh, if you brought this entire paradigm to a Taoist master or an expert in traditional Chinese medicine, they wouldn't just disagree with the methodology.
What would they say?
They would think you are completely missing the point of what it actually means to be alive.
They'd look at these billionaires hooking themselves up to plasma bags and just think they are totally lost.
Completely lost. Let's look at the East, because the contrast here is staggering. It's a complete paradigm shift.
Yeah.
To the Eastern practitioner, treating aging by simply replacing your blood is fundamentally flawed, mostly because of how they view the blood itself. To them, blood is the result, not the cause of your vitality.
Okay, let's bring back that vintage car metaphor.
Let's do it.
The Eastern perspective essentially says that if your body's internal engine is failing, if the cylinders are misfiring and the heat is building up, swapping in the absolute best, most expensive oil in the world won't actually fix the engine. Right.
It'll just end up clogging the system because the engine has already lost its ability to process that oil.
That's spot on. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it highlights the Eastern holistic mindset.
Right, as opposed to the reductionist view.
Exactly. Unlike the reductionist view that isolates individual parts and fluids, the holistic view sees the body as an interconnected, evolving microcosm. You simply cannot isolate a single fluid from the energy that produces it.
So if they aren't buying teenage plasma to fix the system, what is the Eastern solution to a failing engine?
Well, the practice is often described in these traditions as refining essence into Qi.
Okay, refining essence into Qi.
Yes. The foundational belief is that every single human being already carries an internal nuclear reactor. You don't need to go out and harvest energy from someone else.
It's already in you.
Exactly. This reactor is hidden within what they call a Dantian, a vital energy center, located in the lower abdomen. And that center distributes energy through the body's meridian network. So the goal isn't to take someone else's fuel. The goal is to ignite the fire that is already lying dormant within your own body.
That's the idea.
But how does someone actually do that, practically speaking?
The mechanism requires intense, disciplined focus. It's achieved through specific deep breathing techniques, often called Dantian breath, combined with just precise mental stillness.
Wait, I need you to help me bridge the gap here.
Sure.
How does sitting in a room and like controlling your breath actually rival a multi-million-dollar blood transfusion on a cellular level.
I know it sounds like a stretch, but the biology here is actually incredibly sophisticated. When you engage in deep lower abdominal breathing, you're mechanically stimulating the vagus nerve.
Okay, the vagus nerve.
Right.
Yeah.
This is the primary information highway between your brain and your internal organs.
Right.
By intentionally slowing the breath, you forcefully shift your autonomic nervous system out of the sympathetic state.
Which is the high stress, fight or flight mode that causes inflammation, right?
Exactly. And you shift it into the parasympathetic state, which is the rest, digest, and repair mode.
So you're basically manually pulling the levers of your own nervous system.
Precisely. And by doing this, you're improving the body's energy conversion efficiency. You're increasing oxygen delivery to the mitochondria, which boosts ATP production.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. In Eastern terms, they call this cultivating qi, or vital life force. When this metabolic efficiency, this qi, becomes strong enough, it spontaneously purifies the blood.
So the body naturally clears out those inflammatory zombie cells and reboots the immune system from the inside out.
Exactly.
Okay, let me make sure I've got this. So if the West is trying to swap out the hardware by injecting new code, the East is basically trying to upgrade the algorithm that runs the hardware.
That is a very sharp way to look at it. You are rewriting the algorithm of the body's own natural processes. This is the wisdom of what they call searching inward.
It's literally the exact opposite of the Silicon Valley approach.
Completely. Searching inward relies entirely on body sovereignty. You aren't dependent on expensive centrifuges, sterile laboratories, or, a supply of young donors.
Right.
It views life not as a consumable good that you have to constantly purchase on the open market, but as a dynamic energy field that's capable of constant self-evolution and self-healing.
I mean, it sounds incredibly empowering, but also, frankly, incredibly demanding.
Very demanding.
Which brings us to the real friction of this deep dive. Now that we have these two opposing extremes laid out, the expensive outward search of the billionaires versus the disciplined inward search of the spiritual practitioners, what actually happens when they collide in the modern world?
Well, that collision is really what's defining the longevity space in 2026. And there are very sharp ethical and practical critiques of both paths that we really need to examine.
Yeah, let's look at the critique of the Western approach first, because the ethical dilemmas here are just massive.
They are. The primary critique of the Western hardware approach is its deeply exploitative nature. I mean, this raises a huge question about class, wealth, and the commodification of human life.
Right. There's a really chilling societal implication here. Like, when longevity can be bought and sold, and when the blood of young people literally becomes fuel for the rich, are we still human?
It's a dark thought.
Or are we just stepping into a biological caste system?
Exactly. It's the ultimate fetishization of technology, turning actual human beings into biological spare parts.
Yeah.
Societal critics point out that, sure, a billionaire's lab results might show longer telomeres or fewer inflammatory markers, but is that really health?
Or is it just an extreme, desperate fear of death driving this fragile dependency on external substances?
Exactly. You're rich, but you're effectively a vampire, terrified that your supply chain of youth will somehow be disrupted.
It paints a picture of a very cold, paranoid existence.
It really does.
But to be fair to the sources, the Eastern approach is heavily critiqued as well.
Oh, absolutely. While the West's primary problem is exploitation and dependency, the East's problem is accessibility. Specifically, what critics call the massive barrier to entry.
Which honestly sounds a bit counterintuitive, because earlier we established that qi flow and breathing are totally free. Like, you don't need a subscription to your own lungs.
Right. It's financially free, yes. But the cost is paid in time, focus, and just immense effort.
Ah, I see.
Cultivating qi isn't something you do for 5 minutes on an app. It requires extreme self-discipline. It demands long hours of absolute stillness, confronting your own psychological shadows, and a severe restraint of earthly desires.
And let's be real about the world we live in. In our fast-paced, hyper-connected, dopamine-driven society, who actually has the patience for that?
Very few people.
Who is willing to sit perfectly still for hours, wrestling with their own mind just to feel their breath when they could just, swallow a pill or book an appointment at a longevity clinic?
And because modern society lacks that patience, this deeply complex system of internal alchemy is often immediately dismissed by the mainstream.
Oh, as pseudoscience.
Right, pseudoscience or just ancient mysticism. It's too slow, it's too quiet, and it's too intangible for the modern attention span. We prefer measurable interventions over experiential processes.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
There is a massive plot twist in the sources where these two entirely different philosophies actually crash into each other in the modern laboratory.
The convergence is truly fascinating to watch unfold. Despite dismissing Eastern practices as mysticism for decades, top Western scientists are now actively studying things like Vipassana meditation in rigorous clinical settings.
And Vipassana is basically a profound practice of deep bodily observation and breath awareness, right?
Exactly.
So what are they actually finding when they hook these meditating monks up to their machines?
They're discovering the power of epigenetics.
Yeah.
They are finding that focused breath regulation, literally just sitting still and doing the internal work, actually reduces systemic inflammation across the entire body.
Wait, really?
Yes. It lowers cortisol, it reduces the production of those inflammatory cytokines we talked about earlier, and it literally changes a person's gene expression.
Wait. So the physical act of just breathing and focusing your mind can turn certain genes on and off?
Yes. It downregulates the genes responsible for inflammation, and it upregulates the genes responsible for cellular repair.
Oh my God, that is the exact biological goal of the multi-million-dollar blood swaps.
It is.
The West is spending a fortune to mechanically filter out inflammatory proteins, and they're finding out that the East's zero-cost breathing techniques achieve a nearly identical biological mechanism from the inside out.
It's a profound irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
The inward search produces the biochemical result that the outward search is desperately trying to buy.
That is wild.
But while they might share a mechanism at the cellular level, like reducing inflammation and altering gene expression, we have to remember that their ultimate end goals differ fundamentally.
How so? I mean, if they're both trying to repair the cells and clear out the junk, aren't they aiming for the same destination?
Not quite. The West, with its reductionist hardware-swapping mentality, is pursuing literal agelessness.
Meaning they want to freeze the clock.
Exactly. They want to maintain the biological state of an 18-year-old forever, avoiding the natural progression of time and the reality of death at all costs.
So they want to be immortal machines, basically defying nature entirely.
Yes. The East, on the other hand, is pursuing longevity, which means something very different in their context.
Right.
They aren't trying to freeze time or pretend death doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to optimize the body's energy so that aging happens smoothly, without disease, and in perfect harmony with nature.
So it's about the harmony of form and spirit, maximizing your natural lifespan, rather than the outright denial of mortality.
Yeah.
Wow. So what does this all mean for you listening right now? We've laid out two incredibly distinct paths that represent the ultimate longevity showdown of our time.
Yeah. On one side, you have the blood swap. It's instant, it's externally dependent, and it's built entirely on a model of consumption. It relies on utilizing wealth to extract and consume the vitality of the youth.
Right. And on the other side, you have Qi flow. It's gradual, it requires immense, sometimes painful self-discipline, but it is entirely self-sovereign.
Completely.
It relies purely on your own internal capacity to generate life force.
It really forces us to ask how we manage our own health, and perhaps more deeply, how we manage our own psychological anxieties about aging and relevance.
It brings it all home to a very personal question. You only live once. In the face of your own mortality, do you choose to be a consumer of capital, desperately buying your vitality piece by piece from the outside world?
Or do you choose to be the master of your own body, cultivating your energy from the inside?
When you look at the future of human evolution, do we trust the cold needle or the warm breath?
It's a decision between depending on the external world to save you or trusting your internal capacity to heal yourself.
Which really brings me back to that vintage car in the garage. You know, you can spend all your money frantically swapping parts until there's nothing original left, or you can put in the quiet, focused time to finally understand how the engine actually works. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over something that really builds on everything we've explored today.
There.
If both a multi-million-dollar blood infusion from a teenager and sitting perfectly still focusing on your own breath can fundamentally alter your gene expression and change your biology, then where does the true you actually reside? Is your vitality something you can just buy and hold in a plastic bag? Or is it an invisible action that you have to continuously create?
That is the ultimate question of the modern age.
Think about that the next time you take a deep breath. Until next time.